I believe he was in Europe at the time. There was another man named Patrick Knowles who Warner Brothers had hired to kind of be a threat to Errol Flynn because he took off so quickly, and he was not dependable. He was on alcohol, he was on drugs. He would not show up to set on time, so they hired a man named Patrick Knowles who was very British and looked like Errol Flynn somewhat. They had the similar features, similar build, to threaten Errol Flynn, which many studios did during the contract system. I mean, Fox hired Jane Mansfield to threaten Marilyn Monroe. June Allison was somewhat hired at MGM to threaten Judy Garland. And then Patrick Knowles was hired to threaten Errol Flynn, but he was cast as Flynn's brother in the 1936 The Charge of the Light Brigade, and they became best friends. So their attempts to threaten Flynn were thwarted when they got together, and they were like, we're going to be best friends.
Yeah, that's funny, too, because I remember watching the movie and thinking, like, Will Scarlet doesn't do anything. He's just here for most of the movie. And it's funny because they put him in there, like you said, to threaten him, but then they don't give him any lines. you know, like he doesn't do much. And it is interesting. I mean, watching it, like, he definitely just looks like, he's like, okay, you're a pretty boy that they want to put in as Will Scarlet. Like,
he just says, like, every so often he says one or two words and smiles his baby face, and that's all he does.
The only reason we know he's Will Scarlet is because he's wearing red. Because they don't even say his name for like a long time, and like, yeah, I know who Will Scarlet is because he wears scarlet. That's funny. I didn't know that he was there to challenge him. That's amazing.
Well, and by this time they were best,
Yeah, at this point they were fine.
But now that the cast is set, the majority of the Sherwood Forest scenes were shot by William Keighley in Chico, California, in Northern California in Bidwell Park. So Chico was a small town of about 8,000 people in 1937, and the cast and crew of the shoot very much became a part of the community. So Chico City's limits spread several miles into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and in 1905, a large tract of land was donated by the widow of the city's founder, John Bidwell, creating Bidwell Park. Bidwell Park was a majestic 2,400-acre forest. The city of Chico was concerned that having all of these men jumping from the trees and on the trees would do great harm to all of the trees that were in Chico. So Warner Brothers had all of these giant steel-enforced like prop trees or fake trees shipped up to Chico. So a lot of the trees that you see in the movie aren't exactly real. And on top of that, there wasn't as much foliage as they wanted. So they included a lot of different trees that they had built, a lot of brush, a lot of flowers. And the film, they started shooting September 27th, 1937. And they shot until the first week in November with William Keighley as the director at that time. And it was October in California, and it started to get cold. It started to rain. The fog started to roll in, and the leaves started to change. The movie takes place in midsummer. So they used spray paint and started spraying all of the foliage in Chico, in Bidwell Park, green. So all of this greenery, this Technicolor greenery that you see in the film is not real because all the leaves are dead. The movie also would have been gorgeous if they had used like the actual fall colors.
I'm sure that was good for the environment, man.
Yeah, I know.
The runoff off of that was horrible, I guess. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they did some terrible things, killed some trees in Bidwell Park.
Hey, but we got a gorgeous movie out of it. That's all that matters, right?
We got that gorgeous Technicolor green that just melts your corneas out of your face. So the budget was initially set for $1,600,000, which was a ridiculous amount of money in 1937. But out of the $1.6 million, $100,000 was allocated for props alone. So there were more than 20,000 props used in the film, such as 10,000 arrows, all made by the studio staff. Other items included quarterstaffs, maces, war flails, battle axes, neck and leg chains, period breadboards, baking sticks, 12th century trumpets, and musical instruments, arm guards, armor for men and horse, money, lamps, drinking vessels, cooking utensils, longbows, crossbows, quivers, lances, pennants, broadswords, and scores of other items created from information found in rare valuable old books pertaining to the period. Now, soldiers, knights, and saddles had already been made for Cecil B. DeMille's epic The Crusades 2 years earlier. So Warner's rented them from the Western Costume Company. All of these things made their way to Chico along with food, medical supplies, personal baggage, and medical equipment. And transporting all of these things to the Bidwell Park in Chico, California was a 10-car train which carried over 300 people, including extras, makeup artists, technicians, electricians, stuntmen, and various other movie personnel. 450 miles north of Hollywood to the Bidwell Park location. Also in tow were 50 horses in the baggage cars, a squirrel, an owl, and a trained deer. I did not know you could train a deer. I mean, Santa trains deers, but I didn't know, man.
What do you train a deer to do? Stand
I don't
there,
know.
look skittish, play dead? You know, like, what do you do? They were shooting real arrows. I don't know if you're going to get to that, but I read that today, that they were really shooting people.
Well, and the men on the set, like in Nottingham Castle, when Robin Hood escapes from the castle, those were real arrows there that were shot into the extras, and the extras had like armor on, and under that were like big plates of balsa wood.
Yeah.
So the arrows would go into the balsa wood. And the thing that they did not account for was that even if the arrow is going into the balsa wood, it's very large impact. So, okay, one report estimated that in addition, a fleet of 40 trucks would be needed to transport the production unit. And because they were shooting at like the southernmost point of the park, they set up all of their tents in an area at the lower gates of the park, and they called it Warner City. So all of the like the makeup, the trailers, the stables for the horses, the props, all of the technicians and cameramen, they set up camp for shooting each day. Okay, many residents of Chico would come to watch filming. Thousands of onlookers. At first, they would be very loud and they could not get shots, but eventually the Chico newspaper begged the population of Chico to be quiet, and according to director William Keighley, one Sunday, there were thousands in the park, most of them watching the set, but not a single take was ruined by noise or by anyone getting within camera range. So the newspaper article did very well. Costumes were a massive undertaking for Warner Brothers costume designer Milo Anderson. And Anderson was 27, I believe, when he designed the costumes for Robin Hood, but he started designing costumes for feature films at the age of 19. And what had happened was when he was a freshman in high school, he had become interested in costume design, which they had a costume design class in his high school, but it was for girls only. So he went and he took a class to study as an architect. And of course, you know, he was closeted as every homosexual was in 1920s, 1930s Hollywood, but he had a boyfriend who I think was I don't know if he was a costume designer or not, but Gilbert Adrian was one of the top costume designers in Hollywood who designed all of the costumes at MGM up until 1941. He became interested in Milo Anderson's boyfriend. And Milo Anderson's boyfriend had a brief, like, little tout with Gilbert Adrian. They had a brief affair, but in the end, Milo Anderson's boyfriend chose Milo Anderson over Gilbert Adrian. So then when Samuel Goldwyn asked MGM to loan Adrian out to him to design costumes for his film Greeks Had a Word for Them, Adrian was seeking like some sort of revenge on Anderson because Anderson had gotten the boy and Gilbert Adrian had not gotten the boy. So he suggested Anderson to Sam Goldwyn as a joke, and he thought this is going to be ridiculous because he's not going to be able to design any of these costumes. But Sam Goldwyn took Adrian's suggestion seriously, went to Milo Anderson, and Milo Anderson came up with some brilliant sketches that Samuel Goldwyn loved. So he was hired by Goldwyn, and then shortly after that, he was hired as the full-time contract costume director at Warner Brothers. So it was Gilbert Adrian that got him hired at Warner Brothers, even though it was as like a cruel joke. So anyway, and in order to maintain historical accuracy in archery, now you're going to find this interesting, the studio set up a competition to find the best archer in California and then have him train the cast of Robin Hood. Out of 13 arrows, one man shot 9 bullseyes and 4 sevens, which is the second circle just outside the bullseye. His name was Howard Hill, not Harold Hill from The Music Man, but Howard Hill. And he got the job. He was in charge of training the principals in the film as well as the extras how to shoot. Hill was something of an archery celebrity at the time. He was reported to have killed with his bow and arrow a 1,400-pound buffalo and a Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. That is one hell of a bow and arrow right there. He also put 4 arrows in the charging bulk of an 800-pound black bear with fatal results. So the black bear died. He claimed panthers, wolves, and alligators among his prey with his bow and arrow. He was also a great trick shot, and he could knock an apple off a man's head, shoot cigarettes out of the mouths of a steady-nerved people, which I would never let somebody do that in the first place. I would never smoke cigarettes in the first place, but I
Yeah.
would never let somebody shoot a cigarette out of my mouth with a bow and
Well,
arrow.
maybe they didn't let him. Maybe this guy was just a jerk and was just running around shooting arrows at people.
You know, he was a walking cock.
Yeah, it's just people sitting on the bench smoking
and scared the hell out of everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was adept at shooting fish, like swimming in the river. But he was 6'2" like Flynn, but he weighed 20 pounds more than Flynn. He was 200 pounds, and he was from rural Alabama. He was a semi-pro baseball player as well as a golf pro, but his true passion was archery, and Flynn loved him because he loved any kind of like adventurous, rough and tumble man that he could go out on some sort of adventure on and get in trouble. So Howard Hill, not Harold Hill, Howard Hill, advised and trained actors on the Robin Hood set and also donned a costume and did dangerous trick shots in the film. And Flynn and Hill became best friends, like I said. So Hill and Flynn continuously went to California to hunt wild boars and goats as part of they went to Catalina to hunt wild boars and goats as part of Flynn's training, and eventually wound up in jail for shooting out-of-season pheasants in Bidwell Park. So there was some actual poaching behind the scenes.
Real poaching, man. What I'm learning is Howard Hill is who Robin Hood's actually based on. That's what I'm gathering.
Well, yeah, and it even says in the book he was supposed to be like a real life Robin Hood, but he did not steal from the rich and give to the poor. He just shot really big animals. On one hunting excursion, Flynn and Hill went to Richardson Springs to hunt. While hunting, and this was in a Warner Brothers newspaper article that was perpetuated by their press machine. And so while hunting, Flynn's dog flushed a desert wildcat out of the brush and chased it up a tree. Flynn asked for the first shot, then proceeded to shoot a steel-barbed arrow which entered the bobcat's chest and exited out of its back. Get that image in your mind. All of the blood and organs that went along with it. The shock of the arrow, propelled by a 69-pound bow, knocked the animal several feet into the air before it fell to the ground dead. Unlike the pheasant incident, Flynn was a hero to local farmers whose young sheep and small farm animals fell prey to the wildcats. Later reports acknowledged that it was actually Hill who killed the cat and let Flynn take credit, for the sake of the picture, because it appeared in a newspaper article. And also there's another story, I didn't get to type all of it up, but Patrick Knowles, who played Will Scarlet, was like an accomplished pilot. He had his pilot's license. And every day after shooting, he would go to the airfield in Chico, California, and he would take the airplane up and he would fly it. And he would sometimes take Errol Flynn up flying also. And he trained Errol Flynn to do a whole lot of different things. And when the studio found out about this, they wrote a letter to Patrick Knowles saying, "Stop it, you're endangering our star. We will sue you for lots of money if anything happens to him."
That's fair. So many people died in plane accidents.
I know, but when Flynn saw that telegram from Jack Warner, he tore it up. He was like, "Don't pay any attention to them." So then one night after shooting, they were followed, I think, by a second unit director and somebody from the studio itself from Burbank. They were followed to the airfield and they watched Flynn fly, and then they went and they accosted Patrick Knowles and they took his flying license away. He got it back after Robin Hood finished shooting. By the first week of November, shooting at Bidwell Park was complete and the company moved to Busch Gardens in Pasadena, built by brewer and philanthropist Adolph Busch. When he moved to Pasadena in 1905 to shoot the massive archery tournament in which 800 players were bused to suburban Pasadena on November 22nd to begin shooting. At this time, they were 2 weeks behind schedule and way over budget. And part of the problem was, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, William Keighley, he directed some great films. He was really great at directing films like The Man Who Came to Dinner. I don't know if you've seen that movie before. It's a screwball comedy. It's a very witty screwball comedy, and he was very soft-spoken, and I guess he had great swag. He was very sophisticated, but he was not. And Flynn actually begged them to use William Keighley, which he liked because Keighley was kind of a pushover, so Flynn could get away with anything. Because they originally wanted to use Michael Curtiz, which they did not do because Flynn hated Curtiz. So a lot of the footage that was shot in Chico, the studio executives did not like, because William Keighley was not good at like shooting the pace of an adventure film, and also Helby Wallace